Good morning, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. It's Friday, November 14th, 2025, and this is your AM update.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong.
The White House confronts a fresh wave of Jeffrey Epstein-related scrutiny as the House pushes for the release of many more Epstein files.
We've been really fortunate to have Nike reach out to us and say, we want to study transgender youth.
New questions for Nike over its involvement in a shelved study on transgender youth athletic performance. Attorneys for Letitia James and James Comey in court attempting to get the cases against their clients thrown out. And the BBC apologizes to President Trump, but that's all. All that and more coming up in just a moment on your AM Update. As President Trump is settling into his new administration, one of the top Democrats in Congress aiming to undermine the Trump agenda is Senator Dick Durbin. And according to our sponsor, the Electronic Payments Coalition, Senator Durbin has a new scheme, a government takeover of your credit card. Today, Americans have thousands of choices in credit cards, but they say Senator Durbin's plan will result in less competition and less security. And that means more risk for your credit and identity. Learn more at guardyourcard.com and consider telling your senators to stop Dick Durbin's government takeover of your credit card before it's too late. The Jeffrey Epstein story back in the news this week as tens of thousands of newly released documents and emails from the disgraced financier emerge, some with reference to President Trump and other prominent figures. This as a group of House members gain enough signatures to bypass leadership and force a vote on compelling the Department of Justice to release most of its Epstein files. The House Oversight Committee on Wednesday releasing a new batch of Epstein's emails obtained from his estate as part of its investigation into the DOJ's handling of the case. Democrats on the committee highlighting 3 emails referencing President Trump. One 2019 email from Epstein to purported journalist Michael Wolff reading, quote, redacted Mar-a-Lago. Redacted. Trump says he asked me to resign. Never a member, ever. Of course he knew about the girls, as he asked Ghislaine to stop. What that means remains unclear. Trump asked Ghislaine, meaning Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's associate, to stop what exactly? Mr. Trump has previously said he kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago because Epstein recruited Mar-a-Lago spa employee Virginia Giuffre, who would go on to become one of Epstein's victims. Perhaps Mr. Trump told Ghislaine to stop stealing his staff from Mar-a-Lago. We simply do not know. But listen to the New York Times' podcast, The Daily, which, through its powers of clairvoyance, apparently has it all figured out.
So this is very clearly Epstein telling Wolff, for reasons that are not entirely clear, that Trump had full awareness of what Epstein was doing and apparently the fact that he and his associates were recruiting young women and perhaps girls from Mar-a-Lago into their sex trafficking operation.
Whoa, what? Where is the evidence for that? He had full awareness of the sex trafficking operation? Based on what, New York Times? He knew about the girls. That could mean anything. Host Rachel Abrams then asks whether Epstein is denying he was ever a member of Mar-a-Lago, a question Deputy Investigations Editor David Enrich quickly dismisses, redirecting Abrams to his imaginary scoop.
But to me, the bigger sentence is, of course, he knew about the girls. And obviously, Trump has denied having any knowledge of the sex trafficking operation. And so this would appear to be a refutation of that argument.
And it wasn't just the Times that ran with this invention. Take a listen here to CNN and MSNBC.
These are damning emails where Epstein says, this is his view, what he alleges, that Donald Trump knew of Epstein's conduct.
These new documents that we have show that Jeffrey Epstein was talking about President Trump multiple times in emails. Of course, we've long known that they were incredibly close friends, but Trump had denied he was in the files.
Donald Trump has obviously been living all year in fear of release of the Jeffrey Epstein files, and tonight that fear has to be more intense than ever.
There was also an email dated April 2nd, 2011, in which Epstein tells Maxwell that, quote, that dog that hasn't barked yet is Trump. Victim's name redacted, spent hours at my house with him. he has never once been mentioned. Democrats redacting the name of the alleged victim here purportedly to protect her identity as a sex trafficking victim. Except the so-called victim is, once again, Virginia Giuffre, which we know because Republicans released the unredacted document right after the Democrats released the redacted one. Why would the Times continue protecting Giuffre's identity here when Virginia Giuffre, who died in April, had publicly outed herself as an Epstein victim long ago? A news organization has no ethical duty to redact the name of an alleged victim who has already gone public with her allegations, something the Times is well aware of because elsewhere in this very same podcast, it names Giuffre as one of Epstein's victims, just not here when they're discussing the wonderful mystery of an unknown victim who spent hours at Epstein's with Donald Trump. So why would the Democrats and the Times keep Giuffre's identity redacted in this email? Perhaps it's because naming her would have immediately blown up Epstein's story as false. You see, Giuffre gave testimony under oath in this case, swearing that Trump, quote, did not partake in any sex with her, or for that matter, with any others that she knew of connected to Epstein, none of which you would know if you only listened to The Daily, which is why you don't. You listen to AM Update. Good call. Also on Wednesday, the newly sworn-in U.S. Democratic Representative Adelita Grijalva of Arizona becoming the crucial 218th signature on a discharge petition that would force a vote compelling the DOJ to release the bulk of the Epstein files. The bill, excluding classified information, information identifying victims, and child sex abuse materials from being released. Every Democrat signing the petition, along with 4 Republicans, co-sponsor Thomas Massie of Kentucky, Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, Lauren Boebert of Colorado, and Nancy Mace of South Carolina. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson saying on Wednesday he plans to bring the vote to the floor next week. Politico reporting that Democrats believe the vote on the floor will receive overwhelming bipartisan support. If the bill does get passed in the House, however, it would still require approval by the Senate and would need to be signed into law by President Donald Trump. Per Politico, quote, Senate GOP leaders have not guaranteed that they would hold a vote in their chamber. President Trump railing Wednesday on Truth Social against Republicans for going along with Democrats here, quote, the Democrats are trying to bring up the Jeffrey Epstein hoax again because they'll do anything at all to deflect on how badly they've done on the shutdown and so many other subjects. Only a very bad or stupid Republican would fall into that trap. There should be no deflections to Epstein or anything else, and any Republicans involved should be focused only on opening up our country and fixing the massive damage caused by the Democrats. Politico reporting White House aides are brushing off the latest round of Epstein drama, characterizing the latest email release as nothing more than annoying, noting, quote, the Epstein discourse has had little impact on Trump's poll numbers and appears to remain a mostly niche conversation on the right, while the broader electorate is concerned about more bread and butter issues like cost of living. New details emerging about what led Nike to abandon a, quote, transgender youth athletic study. The story kicking off in April with a lengthy New York Times piece quoting researcher Joanna Harper, who is a man pretending to be a woman, as an expert on transgender athletes in sport. The article describing Harper as leading, quote, an ambitious study of trans adolescents that measures their results on a 10-step fitness test before they start hormone therapy, and then after they have begun to medically transition every 6 months for 5 years. Harper telling the Times that study was being funded by Nike. That detail triggering a wave of reporting, most prominently from right-leaning sports site Outkick, which found multiple references linking sports medicine physician Dr. Catherine Ackerman to this same project. In clips and presentations dating back to 2023, Dr. Ackerman describes the study, stating she was approached by Nike to work on it.
We've been really fortunate to have Nike reach out to us and say, we want to study transgender youth. And what can you study? So we very quickly put a study together looking at people who are 12 and above, going through these gender clinics, and then putting them through exercise testing. We're basically doing something similar to the President's Physical Fitness Test. We're doing the EuroFit test testing these people that are going through this treatment. We are not affecting their treatment. They were already going through these clinics anyway. And we're going to check DEXA and labs and do these exercise outcomes to see how they compare to cis adolescents, because that is the $1 million question. I think if we start people at a younger age with treatment, we don't know how much of an effect that's going to have on performance compared to when we hear things in the news about someone who transitions at the age of 35. So stay tuned.
Outkick's reporting sparking immediate public backlash against Nike. Vice President J.D. Vance condemning the study in April on the Clay and Buck Show.
I think that so many of these companies, Nike or otherwise, they got caught up in this cultural zeitgeist of 2020, 2021. And it's like, I don't know, maybe they just thought the progressives were going to win. And so they decided to fund this stuff to the hilt, not realizing that the American people would have a rebellion against the craziness. I think that rebellion on the trans issue in particular, I mean, think about this, giving hormonal therapies to 12-year-old kids, causing irreversible damage to their bodies, forcing young girls to compete against boys in sports, sometimes causing serious injury in the process. I think this issue is such a bad loser among the American people that even some of the true believers have dropped it as a political issue.
Within days of Outkick's reporting, a Nike executive telling the outlet on background their research was, quote, never initialized. But now Harper is giving a different impression, suggesting to the site Out Sports that public pressure did play a role in killing the study. Quote, the haters got wind of it. This was an exciting study. I regret that they made this decision. I wish they hadn't pulled out. I understand in the wake of what happened to Bud Light that Nike got nervous. Those comments reopening questions about what exactly Nike was funding, how far the study advanced, and whether political pressure did force the company to cave. The brand positioning itself as one of the most aggressively pro-LGBTQ athletic brands in America, featuring a full page on its website called No Pride, No Sports, declaring, quote, sport without the LGBTQIA plus community is incomplete. It highlights a partnership with a trans-focused charity called Not a Phase and links to a page called, quote, 10 policies for LGBTQIA plus inclusion in sport. We reached out to the terrible Nike for comment and have yet to hear back. Coming up, former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James pushed to have their criminal cases dismissed. And the BBC apologizes to President Trump for a misleading edit in a documentary. Will it be enough to stop the president from suing them for $1 billion? It is the one time of year, the one time, that Birch Gold Group gives away free gold, with every qualifying purchase. That's right, for Black Friday, which I can't believe it, but it's coming. When you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered one in gold, Birch Gold will send free gold to your home for every $20,000 purchased. I want to do it just because I want to see how does free gold arrive at your house? But truly, is it an armored car? Is it an armed guard? Is it like a hot guy who's just got a gun who's like, here's your gold? I'd love to find out. If I do it, I will report back. Gold started this year around $2,600 an ounce. By October, it was over $4,000 an ounce. Why? Global uncertainty. 2025 has been defined by trade wars. Central banks are pulling from the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency, and military tension continues to build. None of this is great for the dollar. Gold thrives in times of uncertainty. And if you are looking to diversify your savings, Birch Gold can help you. Plus, now through November 30th, get free gold with a qualifying purchase. Just text MK to the number 989898 to claim your eligibility and for a free info kit on gold. But your opportunity for free gold with purchase ends on November 30th. So don't wait. Text MK to the number 989898 for full details. Message and data rates may apply. Lawyers for former FBI Director James Comey and New York State Attorney General Letitia James appearing in an Alexandria, Virginia courtroom yesterday, asking Clinton-appointed U.S. District Judge Cameron Curry to disqualify the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Lindsay Halligan, and to dismiss the cases against their clients. At issue, whether Attorney General Pam Bondi is allowed to make multiple 120-day interim appointments to the post of U.S. Attorney. Under federal law, if a U.S. Attorney vacancy remains unfilled after the 120-day interim period, the judges in that district are supposed to then appoint the interim U.S. Attorney until the Senate confirms an actual nominee for the position. Before Halligan, the acting U.S. Attorney was Eric Siebert, who had been appointed to his seat by Eastern District of Virginia judges following the completion of his own 120-day limit. Siebert resigning on September 19th of this year, reportedly over his reluctance to pursue charges against Comey and James. President Trump maintains he fired Siebert. 3 days later, AG Bondi appointing Lindsay Halligan to replace Siebert, following public calls by President Trump to install Halligan, his former personal attorney, in that position. Within days of being sworn in, Halligan appearing before a grand jury to secure an indictment against Comey on charges of obstructing Congress and making a false statement just days before the 5-year statute of limitations expired. In October, a federal grand jury indicting James on charges of bank fraud and false statements to a financial institution relating to the home she purchased in 2020. Comey and James's legal teams presenting a joint argument. Attorney General Pam Bondi did not have the authority to appoint Halligan once Siebert's 120-day acting period had run out. On October 31st, AG Bondi issuing an order naming Halligan a special attorney within the DOJ, and she retroactively dated her memo to when Halligan was sworn in, delegating to Halligan the power to conduct and supervise prosecutions of Comey and James. Comey's attorney, Ephraim McDowell, arguing that Halloween Day memo proves that Halligan was not lawfully serving as U.S. Attorney when she secured the indictment on September 25th, and says because the statute of limitations has since run out, Comey cannot be reindicted. Letitia James's attorney, Abby Lowell, telling the court Halligan was, quote, pretending to be a U.S. attorney when she appeared before the grand jury in September without Senate confirmation. Lowell conceding, however, that unlike Comey, another prosecutor could still bring an indictment against James because the statute of limitations has not yet run out. DOJ attorney Henry Whitaker, on behalf of Halligan, arguing Comey and James are trying to, quote, elevate what is at best a paperwork error, arguing nothing in the statute bars the attorney general from making more than one interim appointment. Judge Curry appearing skeptical of that argument, noting for centuries it has been judges who make appointments after the 120-day period lapses. Judge Curry says she expects to issue a ruling before Thanksgiving. For now, separate trials for both defendants set to begin in January. Both Comey and James have pleaded not guilty. One day ahead of President Trump's Friday deadline, the BBC formally apologizing for editing Mr. Trump's January 6, 2021 remarks at the U.S. Capitol in a grossly misleading manner. The news outlet stopping short, however, of complying with the president's demand for compensation. Mr. Trump sending notice to the British Broadcasting Corporation earlier this week, threatening a $1 billion defamation lawsuit if the network did not comply with his demands. The warning a response to a BBC documentary titled Trump, A Second Chance, which originally aired the week before the 2024 election. The BBC splicing two separate portions of Mr. Trump's January 6th speech, nearly an hour apart, and omitting entirely his instruction for the crowd to march, quote, peacefully and patriotically toward the Capitol, clearly trying to make it seem that Mr. Trump was trying to incite a mob.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The controversy leading to the resignations of the two top BBC executives earlier this week. The network posting in its corrections section, quote, we accept that our edit unintentionally created the impression that we were showing a single continuous section of the speech, and that this gave the mistaken impression that President Trump had made a direct call for violent action. The network adding that the doc will not be re-aired on any BBC platforms. BBC Chair Samir Shah sending a personal letter to the White House apologizing for the edit. A BBC spokesman saying, quote, while the BBC sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, we strongly disagree that there is a basis for a defamation claim. The apology coming just hours after a new report from the UK paper The Telegraph, which broke this story, documenting a similarly misleading edit on President Trump's January 6th speech that aired in a 2022 BBC program. Uh-oh. A Trump legal spokesman telling The Telegraph it is, quote, now clear that the BBC engaged in a pattern of defamation against President Trump. The BBC saying of the latest accusation, quote, this matter has been brought to our attention and we are now looking into it. Good luck with that. The White House has yet to respond to the BBC's apology. And that'll do it for your AM update. I'm Megyn Kelly. Join me back here for the MK Show live on SiriusXM's The Megyn Kelly Channel, 111 at noon East, on youtube.com/Megyn Kelly, and on all podcast platforms.